This is the Javelin, an American-made missile launcher that has been critical for Ukrainian forces in repelling the Russians. The Javelin's efficacy, especially against tanks, has made it a symbol of the resistance.
There's even a story about Ukrainian parents naming their children, not a joke, their newborn child, Javelin or Javelina.
The U.S. has already committed 8,500 Javelins to Ukraine. Last year, President Biden ordered an additional $653 million worth of Javelins to be sent to aid in the war effort. But Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, the two primary defense contractors that make the Javelin, said that most of what's pledged from the U.S. is existing stocks, not new production, and that doubling production wouldn't be possible until 2026.
There is no magic formula in the supply chain to accelerate this.
The inability of U.S. defense contractors to quickly replenish weaponry has raised questions about the capability of America's defense industry and led some Pentagon officials to argue that industry consolidation has gone too far.
The challenges with the Javelin are a wake-up call.
Ukraine has shown that our approach to acquisition since the end of the Cold War has got a downside.
The Javelin and Stinger missiles become the poster child for both the effects of consolidation and indeed the effects of supply chain problems.
In 2021, the U.S. spent roughly $800 billion on its defense. That's more than China, India, the United Kingdom, Russia, France, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and South Korea combined. Given the astonishing amount America spends on its defense industry, why can't the U.S. arm the Ukrainians faster? The answer lies partially in how America procures its weapons. This graph charts the consolidation that's taken place within the defense sector. In the early 1990s, the U.S. relied on 51 primary contractors. Today, that number is just 5: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics.
The fundamental reason that defense companies decided to consolidate after the Cold War was the department told them to do so. The department was going to be downsizing in terms of troops and equipment, so therefore there was a need for them to merge to address that declining market.
There was not a major competition with a great power the way the U.S. had faced with the Soviet Union. So in that sense, if we take shipbuilding, for example, there was less of a need to build major ships.
This trend of consolidation took place throughout the industry. Tactical missile suppliers declined from 13 to 3. Fixed-wing aircraft suppliers declined from 8 to 3. Satellite suppliers have halved from 8 to 4, and builders of surface ships has dropped from 8 to 2.
The market in the defense industrial base is very different from the commercial marketplace. The difference is that the government is both the customer and the regulator, but it's much harder than a commercial marketplace where you have a virtually unlimited market.
According to a 2022 DoD report, consolidation has left the U.S. reliant on a small number of contractors, which has stifled innovation and undermined price competition.
A lot of contracts, maybe as many as 40% of DoD contracts are in fact sole source. That's either because there isn't another competitor or because the existing manufacturer is just an incumbent and has such advantages because they've been doing it so long that there's not really another viable competitor.
The Javelin is a case in point.
Rocket motors, which are used in Javelin missiles. There's only really 2 producers of those motors, those engines. Aerojet Rocketdyne, and now a unit of Northrop Grumman. Used to be 5, 6 suppliers, and now you're down to 2. And obviously if something goes wrong at one of them, then that puts a lot of burden on the other, and it just slows down the entire chain.
Ramping up Javelin production is also difficult because of the just-in-time supply chain.
Scaling up production for the Javelin is a challenge, and it's a challenge because the way we procure and the way we produce the Javelin. There are many kind of single and sole source suppliers for a lot of these components. The companies that produce these, they produce them for a specific contract need, and producing more than that is not optimal from a business sense.
The supply chain challenges, in part because of COVID, has slowed everything down. So it's actually what it's done is it's extended the time it takes on average to produce systems, in some cases to 2-3 years.
A 2023 CSIS report found that the U.S. is dangerously unprepared for a major conflict such as the war with China in the Taiwan Strait.
The reality is that in a war, according to our war games, and many that have been done within the Department of Defense, both classified and unclassified, the U.S. runs out of key munitions like long-range precision strike in less than a week of a Taiwan Strait conflict. The problem is we don't have enough, not of everything, but of some very specific weapon systems that are important for the kinds of conflicts that we're likely to face with China and that are important to deter those conflicts from even happening.
Today, many of the defense sector's supply chains were built to fight the war on terror.
In terms of acquisitions, the U.S. focused on components that were important to target the Islamic State or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda around the globe, some very specific weapon systems like drones, and didn't require the kinds of stockpiles of munitions that are important for a conventional war. The Ukraine war was a very stark reminder that a conventional war is a war of industrial bases. Countries involved in a conventional war, they churn through munitions, they churn through weapon systems at a much more rapid pace than we had seen during the counterterrorism campaigns after 9/11.
In response to a request for comment, Raytheon wrote, "Our industry has experienced unprecedented supply chain challenges over the past 2 years. However, by leveraging our scale, we have been able to provide significant support to our suppliers, and we're already seeing some components like chips and electronics become more readily available." Which brings us back to the Javelin and a proposed merger of two contractors, Aerojet Rocketdyne, which makes Javelin motors, and L3Harris.
L3Harris and Aerojet, which is agreed to the deal, both argue that by combining and being part of a bigger company, that Aerojet can access resources, access extra investment, which will help it perhaps catch up quicker.
But some politicians, like Senator Elizabeth Warren, disagree. In a tweet earlier this year, she took aim at the proposed $4.7 billion merger, arguing that further consolidation would undermine competitiveness within the sector. It's unclear if the Aerojet Rocketdyne L3Harris deal will go through, especially given that a year ago, the Federal Trade Commission torpedoed Lockheed Martin's attempt to purchase Aerojet Rocketdyne on antitrust grounds.
Lockheed accounted for just about a third of Aerojet's sales. That was turned down ultimately by federal antitrust regulators. They just basically didn't trust that Lockheed would continue to make things for other people and not just for itself. L3Harris is different. It's a very tiny customer of Aerojet at the moment, and it will be moving into areas like missiles where it's currently just not present. So it would in theory emerge as a stronger competitor to Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman.